Hello, everybody. Welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Tuesday, the 23rd, 25th of October, 24th of October, whatever day it is, Tuesday. Um, I would like to issue an apology to anyone I have ever spoken to about the sense of what it is to close a church, to lose your church. I closed a church. I was the priest that closed a church when I was in new and ordained years. I'd only been ordained for 5 years in Church of Redeemer in London, Ontario, and it was heartbreaking, and it was difficult. And I preached again and again, and I believed, and I still believe in resurrection, that was the right time for a Redeemer to close. That we had served the community well, and would go on to serve the communities we moved into even better by allowing ourselves to recognize that our time was done. I still believe that absolutely. But I have come to a place right now, this past week, where it's hitting me harder. You see, I was not a member of Redeemer. I was not a member of that church for any length of time. I was there for a year and a half, and I was the priest. And there had been a community there for 97 years. I have had other churches close. I found out that my church that I went to when I lived in Niagara Falls closed, and the church my parents were married in Hanover, Ontario, has closed. And it hurt. It hurt a great deal. But I didn't spend a lot of time in those churches, a lot of formational time. But last Thursday evening, I sat in for 2 hours on a Zoom call from Brescia University College in London, Ontario, which is where I did my undergraduate degree. Brescia is where I developed my sense of who I am. It is the place I learned that I can run for office, and I can serve on student council, and I can also run for president and not win, and I can deal with it. It is a place where I learned what it was to have true friends. It is a place where I learned what it was to fail and what it was to come back after failing. I spent my first year doing what first year students often do, almost nothing. And I got to the point where at the end of the year, my overall average was a 60. And Sister Dolores, who was the president of the school, called me into her office and said, "Rachel, what are your intentions for next year? Because you got a 60 overall, you're allowed to come back." And had I not gotten a 60, I would have been expelled. But I did get a 60. I told her I'm going to take some time off. I took off a year. And in that year, I discovered a little bit about who I am, and I learned how much I love to learn. And so I went back to Brescia, and I had to fight hard because I wanted to do an honors program, but I had to take extra credit to build myself back into the honors program. I took very few electives, ended up doing things like science for non-science students. And I had a hell of a year. I did better in school that year than I'd ever done before. I learned how to study. I learned how to focus. I got involved with student council. I found ways to discover who I am and that I had a voice. And a big part of that is because I was going to an all-women college. I was going to a place where what I looked like and whether or not guys noticed me was not part of the conversation. I was going to a place that on December the 6th, the year after the Montreal massacre, where women engineering students were shot to death by Lapine. A year later, I was sitting in the foyer talking to some friends, and we realized that there were extra people around. There were police. There was an undercover police presence because a threat had been made to Brescia students on the anniversary of those female engineering students having been killed. And what happened? The sisters, the Ursuline Sisters, blessed the doors of all the students in residence. They prayed that day. They held vigil for their students. That we would be okay. That we would be safe. And we didn't even know. They were taking care of us in ways we had no idea. I had incredible nuns who taught me English. And they taught me critical thinking. And they taught me how to challenge myself and to challenge others. They taught me how to be the woman that I am. And last Thursday, I sat in on a Zoom meeting where we talked about the fact that Brescia is most likely going to be basically absorbed into Western, which when I was going to school, it was the University of Western Ontario, and somewhat time over the years, it just morphed into Western. Brescia students will not graduate from Brescia. They will graduate from Western. Students who have gotten used to small classes and being able to get to know your professors. Some of my classes only had 6 students in them. My biggest class had 40. Over at Western, when I took a course, I had 200 people in my class, and it was a small class. Brescia has offered leadership and the opportunity for women, young women and old women, and women who have had their grandbabies and want to go back to school for university. Brescia has offered that opportunity for 104 years. They offered an opportunity for women to go and be safe. A safe place, a place where if you lived in residence, you lived with other women. There was no fear that you might be attacked in the dorm. There was no worry that you would be leered at or whistled at, or things would be said about you, or rumors would be flying because you lived in a co-ed dorm. Brescia offered opportunities for women to learn how to be women. They offered opportunities for people who they offered courses that recognize that there are people who are not able to just jaunt off to some university and take those credits and have a great wild time. Yes, it was fun, and yes, there were pub crawls, and yes, there were all kinds of normal university behaviors by students. But there was also always an incredible sense that we are supported by a small faculty and staff, that we could ask for help, that we could go to the chaplain, even if we weren't Catholic, and they would pray with us, and they would take care of us and make sure that we were going to be okay, that we had what we needed. Brescia was a place where, when my heart broke, there were people around me to pick up the pieces and put me back together. Brescia was a place where I, Rachel Walker at the time, who has never been a swan, was part of the Brescia court. I was a member of the Brescia court at our Brescia ball. I was one of the princesses in the court. Where else would that have happened? Where else would I have been able to be welcomed so completely and absolutely simply for who I was? But Brescia. And soon, Brescia will be no longer. They're talking about May of 2024. Just months from now, the last graduating class of Brescia. I never won awards, but at Brescia I did. I was acknowledged for the work that I did. I ran for president in my final year, and I didn't win. I lost by 7 votes. But the process of that, the process of not winning, the process of running, having the courage to run for president of the student council at Brescia, doing that work set me up so I had self-confidence, and I had a vision, and I had the ability to discern and try something new, like going off to Huron University College and graduating with distinction and becoming the president of that student council, and going on and working in parishes and being able to speak in public. I am a public speaker because of Sister Mary Lou, who made me do it over and over and over in all of her classes. I have one of the few people in the world who's actually read Don Quixote in its entirety because of Sister Mary Lou. We will lose something significant when Brescia is no more. I will lose something significant when Brescia is no more. I will not be an alumni of an institution that exists. In many ways, I will have lost my church. But it's also significant in loss because women's rights are not enshrined. Not really. We're seeing that in the States. We're seeing that with decisions that are made in politics. It's creeping into Canada as well. Over and over and over, it's all about the money. It's all about the economy. It's almost all about power. And traditionally, women have not had power. At Brescia, women who couldn't go off to school after high school because they had a baby found that they could come back and they could go to school and they could do the preliminary year if they didn't have finish their high school credits. There were opportunities for women who had been abused to really give themselves strength and to find a place where they would be safe. People who came from other countries who could come as refugees and say, I want the opportunity to have education as well. Brescia was a home. It was an international home. And that home will be no longer. All those sisters who taught me Shakespeare, who taught me how to read Don Quixote and Tom Fielding, and who taught me how to parse a poem and how to question and wonder and how to fail and how to pick yourself back up, how to speak in public and how to be a leader. All of that came from Brescia. And that can never be taken away from me. But my educational home is being taken away. And the possibilities and the farcical nature, the idea that you could take hundreds of women who work together and live in a building together and eat together and study together and then send them over to across the road to Western, where there's thousands of people. And they'll keep the clubs and they'll keep the Brescia core competencies. They might try. That's like saying, this little town of Byron in London isn't going to be absorbed by the city of London. Saying that those little parts of the city, those little tiny places outside of big cities aren't going to get gobbled up. Well, you know what happens? Yeah, they do. They may keep their names. They may be a suburb of the city, but it changes them. It changes who they were. And I am aching. I am aching for what is about to be lost. I'm aching for those women who won't have the chance, those little girls whose grandmothers went to Brescia, who tell them, when you grow up, you can go to Brescia. No more. So for those people that I have spoken to about death and resurrection, and we are, as Christians, a resurrection people, and that we have to experience death for new life to happen, I apologize if I sounded glib, because I do believe that. And I know that there will be life after Brescia, and I know that Brescia will always be a part of who I am and who I have been to other people. And I know that new life will spring. But right now, we also have to recognize that before the resurrection, there is the death and there is the grieving. And so I'm grieving. Grieving for what has been and what will never be. And I'm grieving that I won't have a place to go to for homecoming. And I'm grieving because the world has changed so much that people actually think that a women's college isn't needed anymore. May they never have to live into a place or deal with people for whom a women's college absolutely is necessary, because it's the only way they might be able to get education. My prayer this day is that for all of those people for whom Brescia has been a beacon, an opportunity, a place where even when the rest of the world said you aren't welcome here, Brescia said our doors are open and we will welcome you in. Come as you are and grow as you will. For all those people who will lose out, may you be blessed by God to find some place where you will be welcome, to have what Brescia could have given you. Thanks for putting up with my sappiness today, everybody. I'm just in a place right now where I'm realizing that things are changing, and I don't know that they're always changing for the good. But Brescia will go on in the hearts of all those young women who aren't so young anymore, who walked across the front of the basilica, because we didn't graduate with thousands of people from multiple faculties in the alumni hall at Western. I wore my cap and gown and received my Honor Society bracelet in St. Peter's Basilica in London, Ontario, where Brescia held its grad, with my red roses, my silver bracelet that said that I was one of 5 women who was voted into the Honor Society because of what we did, who we were. That will can never compete. It can never be beat by having to walk across the stage where you give the announcer your name so they know who you are and what faculty you're graduating from. When I walked across the front of that basilica, that cathedral, the principal who spoke my name and talked about what I had done in my 4 years at Brescia, she knew who I was, and she didn't need a little cue card to tell her. It's a big part of what will be missing from the fabric of university when Brescia is closed. Have a good day. God bless. I'll see you again tomorrow. Church at Home with Rachel.